10 hours under the knife, and I woke up to 82 missed calls. My throat burned raw from the ventilator tube. My spine was locked tight in a rigid brace. The cell phone on my tray table was buzzing non-stop, and when I finally grabbed it, I saw a voicemail from my mom. I hit play with a shaking thumb. "Hey sweetie, don't freak out. We sold your townhouse to fund your sister's destination wedding. You were completely out, so we forged your signature. 400 grand. All sorted out. My entire place, gone while I was fighting for my life." The ceremony was 2 weeks away, and I could barely lift my fingers. But I dialed one specific attorney. And what went down next completely blindsided them, where relatives show their true colors the second they think you're defenseless, and where the quiet ones finish what the loud ones started. If you've ever been treated like a doormat just because you're dependable, this one's for you. A nurse named Maya checked my monitors and smiled, saying the spinal fusion went great. 10 hours, 3 vertebrae fixed. I used to run this hospital wing myself, but now I was just a helpless patient, and it drove me crazy. I asked her to replay the voicemail, praying the heavy painkillers had just messed with my hearing. It wasn't an accident. My dad sounded way too chill, like he expected me to just roll over. I stared at the ceiling and treated it like a medical trauma. 3 cold facts. I'm a surgical nurse, so I don't freak out. I assess. Somebody forged my signature while I was drugged on an operating table. "Maya," I rasped out, "I need my exact anesthesia logs with timestamps." She nodded, assuming I was loopy. I wasn't. I was already building my case. People assume the strong one just takes the hit. They forget we keep receipts. That condo wasn't just real estate. I bought it at 28, fresh off 2 tours as an army medic. I scrimped, saved every penny, and ground through double shifts for 6 years to build up nearly $300K in equity. It was my hard-earned safety net. Months earlier, my dad casually asked about using my equity for my sister's wedding. I shut it down fast. I figured no was the end of it. Turns out, for toxic people, no is just a challenge. But I knew how they operated. I flagged my bank accounts and pulled up an old power of attorney just in case. Years back, before a deployment, I'd signed an emergency power of attorney making my dad my proxy if I got hurt. I never canceled it, until 2 days before surgery. Sitting in pre-op, I signed a formal revocation and handed him the hard copy right at his kitchen table. He took it, nodded, and tossed it by the fruit bowl. I felt totally safe. That's the most brutal part, that false sense of security. Because somehow, while I was knocked out, my house still got sold. The authority I legally killed had magically resurrected. 4 days later, they discharged me. My spine looked solid on the X-rays, and I was shuffling down the hall with a walker, so insurance kicked me out. The catch hit me the second I reached the curb. I had nowhere to live. My condo, with the custom bathroom rails I installed, technically belonged to strangers now. I couldn't drive, was loaded on muscle relaxers, and couldn't lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk. So I called Tamara, my ride-or-die from nursing school. She drove me to a generic short-term rental, tucked me into bed, and set out my meds. While she fussed, I grabbed a fresh notebook. The military taught me that when life goes up in flames, you build a list and work it. Page 1, dates, surgery logs, and the day of that voicemail. Tamara watched me scribble left-handed and asked if I was calling my mom next. I shook my head. The first person I called wasn't family. It was a real estate attorney named Louis Brennan. I laid out the facts in my flat, clinical shift report voice. Patient stable. Home stolen. Signature forged. Brennan listened in total silence, and that's when the real work began. Brennan fired off 3 rapid-fire questions. Was there an old POA? Yes. Did I revoke it in writing before surgery? Yes. And who is the buyer listed on the new deed? I didn't know yet. There was a heavy silence before he gave me the reality check. If that deed was signed under a revoked authority, it's garbage. But you'll have to prove it step by step. He told me to get all the closing papers and keep my mouth shut around my family. I hung up and tore the paper underlining one core question: who bought my home? That afternoon, my parents showed up with a grocery store bouquet and a casserole, acting like comfort food could erase a stolen house. My mom rushed in talking a mile a minute about vendor deposits and a booming housing market. Then she dropped the killer line, "Honey, it's just a condo." My dad chimed in with the classic guilt trip. "You were always the strong one, Marin. Brooke needed this." I kept my voice ice cold and asked who notarized my signature. My dad dodged, then slipped up. "Roy took care of the paperwork." I boxed that name in my notebook the second they walked out. Before leaving, my mom weaponized the deadline, warning me not to ruin my sister's wedding 3 weeks away. They banked on me staying quiet to keep the peace. But a deadline isn't leverage, it's just a timeline. And timelines are my specialty. 3 weeks wasn't their advantage, 3 weeks was my window. After they left, I stared at the box I'd drawn around Roy's name and mapped out my next move. But a heavy realization hit me. To prove the deed was void, I needed my hard copy of the revocation, the paper my dad left by the fruit bowl. My original documents, including the old POA binder, were trapped in a file box inside the condo. I no longer had keys to my own home. I had shielded myself with paper, and they locked it inside the very asset they stole. 2 days later, Brennan pulled county records and emailed me the scans. Tamara held my laptop steady while I read the deed. The buyer's name was Roy Maddox, my dad's business partner of 20 years. But the price tag stopped my heart, $300,000, way below market value. It wasn't a legitimate sale, it was a fast, quiet fire sale to a crony. My dad had lied about the $425,000 in his voicemail. The missing money had vanished straight into whatever debts my dad owed Roy. Brennan spelled it out. An all-cash undermarket deal to a close associate of the proxy holder is a massive red flag. Worse yet, the title company was run by one of my dad's regular golf buddies. Every single door in this scheme led back to the exact same group of men cutting deals behind closed doors. And the signature, Brennan added, didn't match my real handwriting. That night, Tamara pulled up my driver's license, hospital forms, and an old birthday card to compare side by side. My M has a sharp downstroke from signing medical charts. The one on the deed was rounded and hesitant, a poor trace job. But what froze my blood was the notary block. It claimed I personally appeared before her on surgery day at 1:47 p.m., fully lucid, and signed away my house. Brennan explained that notaries must log the exact time of every signing. At 1:47 p.m. that day, I was completely incapacitated under general anesthesia on an operating table 9 hours deep into spinal fusion surgery. I needed hospital records on official letterhead to prove my exact location to the minute. The next morning, my sister Brooke called, her voice pitched between guilt and anger. "Why are you making this about you?" she snapped. She admitted she knew our parents pulled off the financial maneuver, completely unbothered because she had a wedding dress to fit and a mother-in-law to impress. She just assumed it was all handled, that magical family verb for anything done at my expense. "You assumed it was handled?" I asked her. "Brooke, they sold my home." Then, in our mother's exact tone, "It's just a condo, Marin." My own sister using that same tired phrase. She hadn't forged the name, but she chose blindness so it wouldn't ruin her big day. "Did you ever ask whose money paid for your venue?" I asked. "No," she admitted. "I didn't want to. They viewed me as a renewable resource. I hung up and ordered my complete surgical timeline. Tamara drove me to Roy Maddox's office. I stood leaning on a cane, refusing to sit. "You bought my condo," I said. Roy played dumb, claiming my dad had legal proxy and the cash deal was clean. "You bought a $400,000 home for $300,000 from a man whose daughter was on an operating table," I replied. He didn't flinch. "Your dad owed me. This squares us." My house hadn't just funded a wedding, it wiped out my dad's hidden business debt. "I'd let this go," Roy smirked. "Good luck proving anything." I smiled. "You'd be surprised what I can prove." The hospital records arrived. Anesthesiologists log every single heartbeat every 5 minutes. At 1:47 p.m., the exact minute a notary swore I stood before her signing away my house, I was face down on a surgical table, intubated, with a surgeon's hands deep inside my open spine. This wasn't a debate anymore. This was a direct clash of timestamps, my signature certified at the exact minute a machine was breathing for me. Brennan called it an airtight alibi. "It proves you didn't sign it," he said. "It's textbook forgery. But to wipe that deed out completely, we still need that revocation paper proving their proxy authority was already dead." The hard copy was locked inside the condo. But at 3 a.m., a wave of relief hit me. I am obs. Sively careful. 2 days before surgery, I had scanned and emailed that revocation to my old Army JAG contact, a habit from my deployment days where every critical document gets backed up. I searched my sent folder, and there it was, a clean scan time-stamped 2 days before the closing. They used a dead power of attorney after I had already killed it. I forwarded it to Brennan with one line, "Found it. Look at the date." He called back at 7 a.m., smiling through the phone. "This changes everything. With a pre-closing revocation and an operating table alibi, we don't just argue the deed is shaky, we prove it's completely void." "We would move on 3 fronts at the same time," Brennan explained. First, a quiet title civil action asking a judge to void the deed because the proxy authority was dead and the signature was forged. A void deed transfers 0 property. If a judge agrees, that condo never legally left your name. Second, a criminal referral. Using a dead power of attorney to steal property and faking a signature isn't a family dispute, it's felony fraud for the district attorney. Third, a direct claim against the title insurance company because their notary certified an impossible signature while I was flat on an operating table. Every single one of those options was mine to choose. Brennan would draft the documents, but I pulled the trigger. That detail mattered more than he realized. Nobody was riding in to rescue me. I was picking up the heavy tools myself, step by clinical step, ready to cut out the rot. Then Brennan delivered his warning. Filing a quiet title and recording a lease pendens makes the dispute public record, locking Roy out of selling or refinancing. But my family would know almost immediately. There's no quiet way to do a thing this loud. I checked the calendar. 18 days left until the wedding. "Then let's make it loud," I said, on my schedule. I won't sugarcoat the hardest part, knowing my dad could face actual felony charges with prison time. That evening, my mom called crying before I could even speak. "Marin, please. Do you want to send your father to prison over money?" She pulled every emotional string she had. But I thought about their endless math, where my 6 years of blood, sweat, and double shifts were just an open line of credit for them. "Mom," I replied, "I didn't forge a signature." "He did. I'm just refusing to pay for it with my life." She sobbed that I was being cold. I told her I was being clear, and that they only felt that way because they relied on me being warm enough to rob. I hung up gently. I wouldn't blow up the family over a phone call or a parking lot. I chose to let the legal machinery start rolling quietly, waiting to drop the truth in the one place where it would carry maximum impact with minimum noise, right in front of everyone, at the exact time of my choosing. We filed. Brennan walked me through each signature page on video, and I signed every single one with my real, sharp downstroke M, the genuine article, while my back ached and my resolve stayed rock solid. The quiet title complaint hit civil court, and a lease pendens was slapped on the condo. The property was legally frozen. Roy Maddox couldn't sell it, couldn't borrow against it, and had to watch his clean cash deal turn radioactive. That same week, Brennan handed the package to a financial crimes detective named Reyes, who called to verify the timeline. I read her the anesthesia logs and the revocation date. That familiar silence followed, the sound of an investigator realizing a case just fell right into their lap. The first shockwave hit instantly. My mom's texts turned furious after Roy called my dad in a total panic when the freeze popped up on a routine check. The clean little scam was now front and center under a detective's magnifying glass. The flowers stopped. The fake casseroles stopped. The daily calls shifted from sweet pleas to bitter gasps of, "How could you?" Underneath the chaos, I could feel the countdown ticking toward the ultimate pressure point, the rehearsal dinner, just a week and a half away, where everyone was about to collide. They figured I'd stay home licking my wounds. Instead, I had a medical brace, a walking cane, a thick folder, and a formal invitation. People kept calling it just a condo. To me, it was 6 years of my life and the first safe door that was entirely mine. If anyone has ever called your boundaries selfish just because they profited off your lack of them, you know this pain in your bones. Hit subscribe, because what happens next at that rehearsal dinner changes everything. My dad showed up at the rental alone. No flowers, no fake act. He looked worn out, his shirt wrinkled like he'd slept in his pickup. He dropped his face in his hands, and for a split second, I saw the dad who taught me to change a tire in the rain. The Riverside project tanked, he muttered into his palms. I lost everything. I owed Roy 140 grand. And Brooke's in-laws, the Caldwells, have real money. I couldn't bear the thought of them seeing us throw some cheap, pathetic wedding. His voice cracked. I couldn't stand looking like a failure. Then he lifted his head and asked for the one thing he came to get, drop the lawsuit, just until the wedding passes. Let Brooke have her big day, and we'll figure out the condo. I swear. Even broken and crying, he was still asking me to foot the bill, not borrow, but pay. I kept my tone dead steady. You didn't borrow from me, Dad. You didn't just take from me. You erased me. You put a fake signature on my name and sold the one piece of proof that I ever built something on my own. He stood up, his sad act instantly curdling into rage. You're going to humiliate this entire family, he spat out by the door. You'll regret this. No, I replied softly. I really won't. Once he left, I did what I always do when my adrenaline spikes, I organized. I built the cleanest folder of my life at that rental kitchen table, designing it so the raw truth needed zero narration. Page 1, the revocation of power of attorney, complete with the email timestamp. Page 2, the fraudulent deed paired with the notary's log entry stamping my signature at 1:47 p.m. Page 3, the official hospital anesthesia sheet showing my vital signs logged every 5 minutes, proving a machine was breathing for me at that exact minute. Page 4, the county-recorded deed proving Roy bought a $425,000 home for $300 grand in cash. Page 5, Brennan's legal summary confirming that a deed executed via a dead proxy with an impossible timestamp is completely void. I made 3 neat copies and memorized nothing, because the documents spoke for themselves. The documents were the speech. Then I practiced the harder part, standing. I got up slowly, determined to be on my feet for the moment that mattered. Tamara had brought me a sleek, dark wood cane that looked more antique than medical. I paced the length of the rental, my spine held rigid by the brace. My physical therapist would have been horrified and proud. With every lap, I kept the same thought in mind. They expected a woman who couldn't stand, but I was going to walk into that room entirely on my own. For days before the wedding, Brooke called back, her rehearsed sweetness completely gone. "I heard there's police," she said, her voice shaking. "A detective went to Dad's office." "Maren, what is actually happening?" So I told her. No anger, just plain, hard facts. The expired power of attorney. The written revocation signed 2 days before surgery. The forged signature logged at 1:47 p.m. while my chest was wide open on an operating table. Roy, the hidden debt, and the below-market cash sale. I laid it out like a medical chart and waited. The silence dragged on for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded tiny. "They told me you agreed to help. They told me you wanted to." There it was, the comforting lie they fed her so she could keep her conscience clean. "I never agreed to anything, Brooke," I said. "I was unconscious." I heard her swallow hard. "The whole wedding," she whispered, realization finally dawning on her. "The venue, the dress. All of it. It's your house. It's my house." She didn't promise a miracle or offer a real apology, not yet. But something fundamental had shifted. I could hear the sound of a person who had spent months admiring a perfect wedding starting to notice that the foundation was built out of somebody else's stolen home. "I have to go," she whispered, and hung up. I didn't know which way she'd fall. I'd stopped expecting my family to surprise me with integrity. But for the first time, one of them had actually asked what happened, and she hated the answer. The rehearsal dinner was booked at Brookhaven Country Club, a high-end spot with valets and a massive stone fireplace. The Caldwells were footing the bill for the meal, a detail my mom bragged about constantly because they were the exact reason my house had been sold. Edmund Caldwell owned a string of car dealerships, and his wife wore genuine pearls. They were the audience my parents had bankrupted me to impress. And that was precisely why the truth needed to drop right in front of them. My dad's entire crime was fueled by an obsession with appearances, refusing to look like a failure in front of high society. So high society was going to watch it burn. When I confirmed I'd attend, my mother sounded relieved. They assumed my presence meant total surrender, that I'd quietly swallow the betrayal, sit like a good little sister, and let the wedding happen while we sorted things out later. The way I always handled things, by absorbing the damage. "I'm so glad you're coming," she gushed. "It means everything as family." As family. I turned those words over in my head. They wanted me there as scenery, proof to the Caldwells that the Suttons were warm, loving, and generous. I would show up as family, all right, just not the version they expected. The night before, I laid out my clothes, a dark blue dress that concealed the brace, and sleek flat shoes I could actually stand in. I slid the 3 folders into a leather portfolio. They thought I was arriving to surrender. I was arriving to drop the gavel in front of every single person they sacrificed me to impress. My mom tracked me down in the club lobby 10 minutes before the room opened. My mom ambushed me in the club lobby 20 minutes before dinner, coming in hot to neutralize me. She grabbed my arm, flashing a fake smile for any onlookers as she steered me toward the coat check. "Listen," she murmured. "Whatever legal nonsense you're pulling, this isn't the night. The Caldwells are here. If you make a scene and embarrass us, you'll lose this family forever. Is a building really worth that?" She squeezed my arm tighter. "It's just a condo, Maren. Don't blow up your sister's day." The family hymn, played for the 3rd time by her lips and roughly the 30th overall. I stared at my mother, taking in her practiced church smile and the pearls she'd borrowed to match the Caldwells. That was the exact second the last flickering ember of family loyalty quietly went out. "It was never just a condo, Mom," I said, my voice dead calm. "It was the one thing in this family none of you built. That's why you could steal it without flinching. You never put a single dollar into it, so it never felt real to you that it was mine. Her smile twitched. You're being so dramatic. I'm being calm, I replied. You should be grateful. A truly dramatic person would have called the Caldwells last week. Her face drained of color under the lobby lights. She opened her mouth to argue, but nothing came out. Across the room, a chime rang out, calling everyone to the banquet tables. Let's head in, I said, gently pulling my arm from her grip. I'd hate to be late. I have a toast to give. Earlier that afternoon, Brennan had reminded me from the back seat of Tamara's car that I didn't need to perform or yell. The legal machine was already moving at full speed. The quiet title was filed, the property freeze was locked in, and Detective Reyes had officially summoned both my dad and Roy for questioning the following week. You don't have to convince anyone tonight, Brennan had said. The facts will do the talking. The facts will do the work in a courtroom regardless, Brennan had said. I knew he was right. But I also knew something a lawyer didn't. My family didn't fear courtrooms. Abstract legal battles were months away and easy to spin to the neighbors as a mere misunderstanding. What they truly feared, what my dad had bankrupted me to avoid, was being seen starkly by the exact people whose approval they traded my home to buy. This wasn't just about winning a legal case, it was about ensuring that when I won, no one in that room could ever sweep it under the rug or feed the Caldwells a sanitized version of events. I wanted live witnesses. I wanted the cold truth spoken out loud in broad daylight by me, backed up by ironclad paper, so it could never be rewritten into another comfortable family myth. As I stepped into the banquet room on my own 2 feet, cane in one hand, leather portfolio in the other, I felt a strange, absolute steadiness. It wasn't fueled by petty vengeance, but by clinical calm. It was the exact feeling I got right before a major surgery, once all the instruments were laid out and the room was fully prepped. The dining hall glowed with candlelight, seating 40 guests at long tables with the Caldwells holding court near the head. My parents were performing a masterclass in toxic hospitality, smiling so hard you could see the sheer strain in their eyes. When my dad spotted me, his expression twisted into a complex mix of relief and pure dread. Walking over, he grabbed my elbow, to my absolute revulsion, and steered me straight toward the Caldwells like a prized show pony. Edmund, Patricia, this is my oldest daughter, Marin, he announced, his voice beaming with false pride. She's our rock. A surgical nurse who did 2 military tours. So generous, this one. Always taking care of the whole family. I shook Patricia Caldwell's cool, manicured hand, smiled sweetly, and said it was an absolute pleasure to meet her. I let my dad bask right there in the fabricated halo of the self-sacrificing daughter. After all, the higher he climbed on that throne of lies, the harder he was about to fall. I took my assigned seat. Brooke caught my eye across the room, wearing a look of quiet, unresolved dread. I gave her a tiny, reassuring nod. Salads were served and cleared. Wine glasses were topped off. Right on schedule, my father rose, tapped his fork against his crystal glass, and commanded the room's attention to deliver the speech he had been rehearsing for weeks. I just want to thank everyone, he began, his voice thick with performative emotion, for being here as our families unite. A wedding like this takes sacrifice. And I want to say how proud I am of the way this family pulls together when it counts, and how everyone gave what they could to make Brooke's day perfect. He raised his glass directly toward me, the generous, self-sacrificing daughter, inviting the entire room to admire his fabricated fiction. I calmly set down my napkin and stood up. Since we're toasting sacrifice, I said, let me say a few words about my sister. The room turned toward me, warm and expectant. Brooke froze. My father's glass hovered midair. I kept my tone level, soft, and crystal clear, because I knew from years of experience that the calmest voice in the room is the one nobody can look away from. Brooke, I love you. I have since the day they brought you home from the hospital. So I want everyone here, both families, to know exactly what paid for tonight. I reached into my leather portfolio and pulled out the first document. 3 weeks ago, I had major spine surgery. 9 hours under general anesthesia. I lifted the next page. While I was unconscious, a deed was secretly executed, selling my condominium. My home. Listed at $425,000, but sold under the table for $300,000 in cash to my father's business partner. A low murmur rippled across the tables. My mother's hand flew straight to her throat. The deed bears my signature, I continued, sliding the paper across the table where Edmund Caldwell could see it. It was certified by a notary whose official logbook claims I stood right in front of her, fully lucid, and signed it at 1:47 in the afternoon. I laid the hospital record right beside it. This is my certified surgical chart. At 1:47 that afternoon, a machine was breathing for me. There was an endotracheal tube in my throat, a catheter in my arm, and a surgeon's hands deep inside my open spine. So I'd like someone in this room to explain whose hand actually signed my name. The silence that followed was total. You could hear the crackle of the candles. And 2 days before that surgery, I said, placing the final page down, I had already formally revoked the power of attorney they used, in writing, with a verified digital timestamp. I looked straight at the Caldwells, then back at my pale, trembling family. A deed signed under a revoked power of attorney, carrying a forged signature certified at a time I was provably unconscious, is legally worthless. The sale was never legal. The condo was never theirs to sell. That was the exact moment my father snapped. He slammed his wine glass down onto the table so hard the red liquid splashed everywhere. How dare you, he roared, shoving himself to his feet with a purple face. How dare you pull this stunt here in front of everyone, after everything this family did for you? Everything you did for me. I repeated, keeping my voice completely flat and level. The contrast did all the heavy lifting. He was trembling with rage while I stood like stone. Dad, you destroyed the only proof that I ever stood on my own. You didn't do me any favors. You stole the one thing I built entirely without your help. I'm just taking it back. My mom broke down sobbing, frantically reaching toward the Caldwells. It's not, please, it's just a misunderstanding. But Patricia Caldwell had already picked up the hospital anesthesia printout. Her chest rose and fell beneath her pearls, her expression settling into the icy, blank mask of a woman completely recalculating a bloodline. I let the silence hang in the air, because some silences act as evidence all on their own. I unhurriedly gathered my paperwork. I didn't come here to ruin a wedding, I told the room, and I meant every word. I came so nobody could pretend this crime didn't happen. The police already have the case file. A detective is handling it, and my father and Mr. Maddox will be interviewed this week. I placed a complete copy of the evidence folder right on the table in front of my parents, setting it down gently as if it were fragile. That's for you, so there's zero confusion later about what went down tonight. My dad collapsed back into his chair as if all the air had been sucked out of him. My mom buried her face in a napkin, while the Caldwells sat in frozen, upright horror, their elegant hospitality turning instantly glacial. Then Brooke stood up. The entire banquet room watched my little sister push back her chair, her gown rustling, her face wet with tears. She walked the length of the long table, stepping past our ruined parents, and came straight to my side. She didn't try to absolve them or pretend it was okay. She just stood shoulder to shoulder with me, speaking loud enough for the Caldwells to hear across the silence. I didn't know it was this. I swear I didn't. I should have asked. I am so sorry, Marin. It wasn't a total fix, but it was the first honest thing anyone in that family had said in years. I took her hand. Then I grabbed my cane and turned to leave, because I'd delivered my message, and the rest belonged to the courts. Every step toward the exit throbbed, the brace biting hard into my spine. I walked it anyway, slow, straight, and on my own 2 feet, exactly as I'd practiced. The legal battle wasn't instant, but it was heavily lopsided. Confronted with my hospital chart and the time-stamped revocation, Roy Maddox's lawyer told him to surrender a defense he couldn't possibly win. To avoid a brutal trial, Roy agreed to a consent judgment, and the judge voided the deed. Title returned right back to my name, where it legally belonged all along. The title insurance company quickly settled with me out of court to cover all legal fees and then some, because a forged notary stamp is their worst nightmare. Meanwhile, Detective Reyes dragged Roy and my father in for questioning. Roy had to explain why he bought a house below market value from an unconscious owner, while my dad had to answer for using a dead, formally revoked power of attorney. Months later, I stood alone in my living room. It was completely empty. Roy had hauled out the furniture he never had a right to touch, but it was mine. Afternoon light streamed across the floor where I had sat and cried on move-in night 6 years prior. I stood there with my cane and my healing spine, feeling the absolute peace of holding my own keys. As for the wedding, the Caldwells wanted zero part in a bloodline facing felony financial crimes. Brooke called it off. She and I are rebuilding now, slowly, carefully, and without any more lies. I went back to work the minute my surgeon cleared me, stepping right back into the operating room, back to being the calm professional holding the instruments. But now, whenever a patient wheels in and the anesthesiologist starts the clock, I think about how meticulously those records are kept every 5 minutes. I think about how a system built strictly to save a physical life ended up saving mine in a way no one could have ever predicted. Here is what I know now, and it cost me my home to finally understand it: love that only flows one direction isn't love at all. It's just an invoice. And I stopped paying the day I proved that my name, even poorly forged by someone else's hand, still belonged entirely to me. 9 hours under, 82 missed calls, and one single revoked signature they forgot I had backed up to myself. That is how a quiet woman takes her life back.